And welcome to Community Kitchen. We've got something new happening in the radio station this morning. We're in the new studio. And for those of you who can't see, maybe we should take a photo and put it online for you. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think everything's actually working nicer. Oh, the headphones and the mic sound so much better. Maybe it's just the new update. But that's what we're talking about here at 101.5. We love to get community news out there. So if you're growing or producing, great time to come in and share something, and you can have a look at the studio and we can go live from there. So don't forget, if you do have things of interest, to give us a buzz on 54951015. Today we're going to be talking sheep, and in talking sheep we're going to be talking sheep cheese. And when I'm getting around the place and you go to different markets and you're having a look and you're Googling, come across a woman in Beaudesert who has beautiful sheep cheeses. And I'm sure we're going to learn all about that a little bit later. And also, when I was in my travels, I found a gentleman from Pittsworth who has a micro bakery. It's interesting, isn't it, what makes people just concentrate on something like that? Why you'd have a micro bakery in the middle of a small area, why you would have sheep and produce your own cheese. I'm really interested in people like that. I think it's fantastic. I'm going to share a recipe a little bit later. We're talking about winter, and of course citrus is such a beautiful thing in the winter time. So last week when I spoke to Alex from Feast Mag, she was saying that there's a shaker lemon tart which is just amazingly beautiful. It's an American tart. It was known in the I can't. Isn't that terrible when a word just doesn't come? But anyway, it's a shaker community which is no longer around, but their lemons were very, very hard to grow in the American Midwest. So these pies were really prized offerings, and it's like a little bit of a lemon marmalade. So we'll be sharing that a little bit later, because I'm sure everyone's got lemons coming on their tree. So I think what we might do is go to a song, and then we'll come back and we'll talk to our first guest, Carolyn Davison from the Towery Sheep Cheese Factory. And welcome back to Community Kitchen. I have my first guest online, Carolyn Davison from Towery Sheep. How are you?
Good morning, Annette.
I loved the little pamphlet I found. I was at the Hampton Food Fest, and I tried your blue vein cheese there. Surprisingly, it was from sheep's milk.
That's right. All our cheeses here on the farm are from sheep's milk.
So how did this all start? I mean, there's so many different little products that people are producing at home now, but sheep's milk's not something that you see a lot of.
No, and yet in the rest of the world, there's more sheep cheese than cow's cheese.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because I was just reading in your pamphlet there that they were milked by man some 3,000 years before cows.
That's right, yes. We have a little argument, an ongoing argument with the goat people who came first, but I think even the Bible has a little difficulty in working out which came first. So,
which came first, the sheep or the goat?
Or the goat, yes.
It's a little bit different. So, with your, you've got a little farm, no doubt. So,
yes.
How many sheep do you have on your farm?
We've got about 400 sheep, and we milk 50 at a time because we do a lot of breeding as well to improve the milking flock, not only in Australia, but we export as well. And yes, we milk 50 at a time.
So therefore, if you've got the 400 sheep, what sort of sheep are they? Don't look like the everyone thinks of Australia, the merinos and things like that. These are very different looking sheep.
They are different. They're called the Awassi, which is the Middle Eastern milking sheep, originally from Israel. And they arrived in Australia in about 98, and we've got quite a few of them now.
So when you're talking about, when you're actually milking and that, are you using all of the sheep and just rotating on a different basis?
Yes, because we're still flock recording our milk and improving our flock all the time. 50 is enough for our cheese consumption,
right?
And we generally milk them for about 3 months, and then we'll get the next flock in, like the next mob in.
There's always a debate about the old milking cow, and it was to keep the calf away. And then the more you read about it, they say you're better off running the calf with the cow. What do you do with the sheep?
Yes, we're in total agreement with that. We leave our lambs on, and we just take them off at night time, and milk the ewe in the morning, and then the lamb goes back with the ewe all day.
So with yourself, were you actually someone who worked in this field, that you knew how to make cheese? Were you a cheese maker before?
Not really, but I'm a fourth generation merino breeder.
Oh, okay.
So a sheep came easy, and when I decided one day that I needed to make cheese, it was always going to be sheep. But merinos obviously aren't any good for cheese making.
Sure.
So that's why I had to, find a breed that was. And in Australia, it's very hard because the only other breed that's really suitable for milking sheep is the East Frisian, but it's a very white sheep and not very good for Queensland harsh, humid conditions and things.
So do you have to look after your pastures? You're completely improving your pastures all the time?
Yes,
yeah.
and we practice rotation of our paddocks, and not only for grass but for worm control, and because we try to be as organic as possible.
That can be difficult, can't it?
It can be very difficult, and it's very difficult to be totally organic. You just can't. Different where you don't have a worm or parasite problem, but here in the southeast where it's very humid and worms love this country here, so.
It's interesting, isn't it? We breed cattle and we have the same problem. We try so hard to do everything we can naturally, but because we have deer, they carry ticks through your property.
Exactly,
and,
yes.
You've got all these elements that you have to fight with all the time. Now, what happens with shearing? Do you have to worry about shearing these?
Yes, they're not a shedding sheep, even though we've done quite a little bit of research into crossing them with a shedder. But we've got a few that self-shed, but not a whole flock of them. So we have to shear them every 12 months, and their wool is really not worth anything.
Oh, no.
So I think we get 50 cents a kilo for it,
Yeah.
which doesn't even cover the shearing costs of it. But it's just one of those. It's just part of the animal husbandry of the sheep, so...
So, Carolyn, when you started, did you have to import all of your flock?
No, the DPI brought them in about 1998.
Okay.
And we've just bred up and gone from there, because we started off with a flock of East Frisian Dorset crosses. So. And now all our Aussies are crossed over those as well.
Sounds like it's a fairly full-time job.
It is a full-time job, yes.
Now, I'm assuming that your milking area, which I think you call your milking parlour, it's all automated, is it?
Not as such. We still have to put the cups on the teats, and sheep only have two. So we still have to do that and turn it on. And it takes a minute to milk a sheep. So yes, I guess we're automated but we're not like a robotic dairy or something.
Yeah. Now with your cheeses, I tasted the Blue Vein, I love Blue Vein, and it was just absolutely beautiful, very very creamy in comparison to a lot of the other cheeses.
Yes. See, sheep's milk is very very creamy, and it's a very clean tasting milk. It doesn't leave an oily taste at the back of your palate like say a cow's milk does. And it's a lovely milk to work with.
Do you actually use it in the home?
Yes, we do.
So you don't actually have cow's milk?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, we use we use sheep milk all the time, and our yoghurt, as we call our yogurt, we have that in the home all the time.
It's fantastic. Well. They're saying that just reading all the different things, and you've covered so much on your brochure here, but the calcium levels also in the sheep milk were really high.
Exactly. Yes, it's a perfect milk, really. And it's just a shame that it costs so much to set up a big enough dairy to produce milk. whereas because we use all our milk in our cheese making.
It's interesting, isn't it? The more you hear about people, there's so many different problems coming up with people's health. There's a lot of allergies and people are lactose intolerant. And I had the pleasure of talking to a woman, and she milks camels, which of course is quite a visual bit of a giggle, really, when you think about that.
Yes.
But a lot of people are finding, because they've got a lot of these problems, that the different milks seem to alleviate that.
Exactly. Yes, but don't get me started on that.
Well, we'd like to get you started on that. I mean, one of the things that I sort of tend to think about a lot here is in the last few years we've had such a battle with the dairy industry.
Yes.
And we've got so many reconstituted milks on our market. It's just so confusing for everybody.
Thanks. Well, you brought it up, I didn't.
Well,
honestly, if they left our milk alone, I don't think we'd have half the problems we've got. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that because people are coming, they're turning to other milks, other cheeses because of that reason. But I think the cow industry have done it to themselves if they'd have left their milk alone.
Yeah, I think it's very sad, isn't it?
It is. It's very sad.
We're going to lose. I keep saying to people that, we've got all these cheap milk prices. Just ignore them and pay the extra because 5-10 years down the track, we're not going to have proper milk.
Exactly.
And it's hard to find now.
It is. I was very heartened. I was at a hospital in Ipswich a couple of days ago in their little kiosk. Mm. It was all full cream milk in the fridge.
Very good.
I was very, very pleased about that.
Well, I must be a little like you. I change my shopping patterns if they do not have full cream milk because I feel so passionate about this.
Exactly.
In the fact that it's a little bit like crying after the horse has bolted. But we really have to be, I'm not supposed to have opinions sometimes on the radio, but it's one of those things I do feel very passionate about because our farmers are suffering, our beef growers are suffering, and yet no one wants to actually put the information out there because it is quite a controversial debate. Yes,
that's right, it's just very sad. I've just had a cheese school with a French cheese technician, and he was saying the French 10 years ago started, trying to bring in all these. You had to use chlorine for everything, and they've quickly realised that wasn't the way to go. That they were just breeding superbugs, and so a lot of that part of the world has reverted back to what it was before.
I think there's a real swing. I mean, I've been talking to people about food on this radio show for 6 years, and you keep trying to get to the basis of what really is going on, because the more you hear about it, the fact that we have so many young children with so many allergies, we've got so many sicknesses, and talking of, even with your milk, someone was saying that the children with a lot of allergies, they find that goat's milk is fantastic for soap because it, eliminates a lot of problems. And when you start to see these things, you think, well, there must be something in the natural and in nature's way that provides us with all the different resources we need to exist, and yet we seem to keep ignoring these.
That's right, yes.
So tell me this, now with your making of the cheese, you're holding your milk there, how often do you make cheese?
That depends, and it varies from week to week. Sometimes I'll make cheese every day for a week, but then I won't need cheese, so I'll freeze that milk. And again, that's a lot different to normal because sheep's milk is so many more solids in it. It has to be frozen a lot deeper than cow's milk. So we have to freeze our milk at -25 instead of -18. So yes, I can freeze the milk and then use it again.
So you're making soft cheeses. Are you making hard cheeses?
Yes, hard cheeses are more my specialty than soft cheeses. We have 2 big maturing rooms here that we can mature our different hard cheeses in. And I've got, at the moment, we've got a bus this morning, and I've just cut open a 13-month-old pecorino.
Oh, beautiful.
And it smells beautiful. So I haven't had the pleasure of having a taste yet, but it smells very nice.
That's fantastic. So you, and so therefore, I'm just trying to get the picture. So your daily life is tending your sheep, milking once a day?
Once a day, yes. We milk in the morning. I can make cheese within the hour. I can milk the sheep. It goes straight into our vat in the cheese room, and it can be pasteurised and back down to cooling point and cheese within the hour.
That's fantastic. Now, I'd really like you to explain to people, how do they find you? Because it'd be a nice day trip.
It is, yes, and it's just so peaceful. It's so peaceful here. We're ringed by the mountains, and it's all open grazing country. So once you come over the railway line, it's just all peace.
That's lovely. You're in the Beaudesert area?
Yes, we are, yes.
And you're not hard to find, I'm imagining?
No, we're not hard to find at all.
That's fantastic. I know you have a great website. I've been on there and had a little look. And are people going to be starting to see your cheeses in the supermarkets?
I kept being asked that question, and we have a lot of delis who want our cheeses. But we like to, and I guess which is why I started making cheese in the first place, I do like to be different, and I do like to keep that individuality. And, you can only get our cheeses if you really look for them. So
that's fantastic.
On farm, because we do like to promote where we live and our rural lifestyle here. So it really is worth the trip to come out, have a cheese platter, and look at the sheep where the milk comes from, and just get that whole sort of, we really are a paddock to plate, or paddock to plate with our cheeses. So
I think it's fantastic. And I mean, with something like a pecorino, of course, they're great to store. That you can cut them up and keep them for later on, which is great. Well, go and enjoy your bus tour. I can hear them in the background there. How gorgeous. I think that's lovely. Well, thank you for joining me this morning, and best of luck. I think it's fantastic.
Thanks, Annette.
Bye now.
Thank you, bye.
And we've been talking to Carolyn Davidson from Beaudesert, and that's unique, isn't it, to have a little, the Towrie sheep cheeses. It was just something that really caught my eye, and being a blue vein eater, I can assure you it tasted fantastic. We're going to go to our sponsors, and you're back. I was trying to get out before that we were going to be talking about a Ohio lemon pie. I don't know why that just would not happen in my mouth, but this tart looks fantastic. And of course you're making a regular base, and pastry differs, doesn't it? But I'm going to give you the recipe that they've actually put with the filling here, which is 100 grams of unsalted butter, 55 grams of icing sugar, which is a third of a cup, and 1 1/4 cups of plain flour and 1 egg yolk. You know how to make the pastry. You bind it all together, and then if it's not coming together nicely, just add some ice water. That always helps. I usually refrigerate mine and leave it for a little while you get everything else organised. You're rolling out your pastry, and you're going to blind bake that for about 20 minutes in 180. The filling is just fantastic. So once you've actually blind baked and you've got 180 degrees, drop your oven back to 160. You're going to whisk together 3 eggs, 2 cups of caster sugar, 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, which has been melted and cooled, and with the and you have your Meyer lemons, 2 Meyer lemons, and they're really beautiful and juicy at this time of year. So you're cutting them ever so finely and pouring the mixture, putting the Meyer lemons in the bottom of the pan, and whisk together the eggs and butter. Then gently combine with the sliced lemon mixture and pour into the tart shell and bake for 25 minutes at 160, which I think is fantastic. Now, with the lemons, probably the best way to do it is, prior to doing anything, place your lemons in the freezer for about 3 hours until quite firm, and then slice them really, really thin, but removing the seeds, of course. Place in a bowl, add a little bit of sugar and toss gently, and leave that overnight, because what will happen is the sugar will start to break down, and it'll just help. And once you've actually laid that out in the pan and in the tart shell and cooked it, it just looks fantastic. So you're going to make your pastry first, let that sort of rest for a little while. You're blind baking that for about 20 minutes in 180. Once you've taken that out, drop your oven temperature to 160. Then you're whisking your eggs, 3 eggs, 2 cups of sugar, the 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, which is melted and cooled, and then your lemon mixture that you'd already prepared the day before. Sounds like one of those things, doesn't it? Prepare the day before. And you're baking that for 25 minutes until just set. I think it just looks sensational, and with those beautiful lemons around at the moment, it looks just so nice. It was interesting when I was talking to Alex Clark about the magazine and featuring lemons this month. She had the Lemon Delicious, which of course is such a classic on so many people's tables. We've had over the years change and people alter it. But the lovely thing about these recipes, I think it's something that always is so good for me to hear, is that family recipes are continuing along. And it doesn't mean they own the recipe, it's just something that's been baked in their house. Could have come from one of Margaret Fulton's cookbooks, which she advocates that she loves having her recipes carried on throughout her family, and I think that's just such a nice thing. Give it a go, and I will give you the ingredients pardon me, towards the end of the show. I think we'll go to a song, and then we're going to come back and we're going to be talking to Laurie from his Micro Bakery.
You're listening to Our Community Kitchen with Annette Long.
And welcome back. We have our next guest online, Laurie Stiller from Kalala, which is a micro bakery at Pittsworth. Good morning, Laurie.
Good morning, Annette. How are you?
You're doing a bread delivery as we speak, I hear.
I am indeed. Just finished, actually.
Oh, that's great. I went looking at Hampton a little while ago, and I've just been talking to a lady who has beautiful sheep cheeses, and
Yes.
and I bought some of your bread, and I thought, I wish you lived closer to me.
I wish you lived closer to me.
So tell me this, Laurie. Tell us a little bit about your history, but I know that you weren't a baker for starters, were you?
No. I've spent my life in the government and corporate world. So I've had my career, if you like, and the last 8 years or so of my life, we've been living up near Pittsworth, and my wife's elderly parents live there. So we really came up to care for them, and in the process, I got interested in building a wood-fired oven and then a bakery, and by then I'd invested a fair bit of money, so I thought I'd better try and earn some. So I started going commercial, and it's been, I set out wanting to do something more with my hands. After spending all of my time, my working life in my head, I wanted something a little more tangible, and I thought, baking, I can do that, I can follow a recipe. But how wrong I was.
So you'd never really had any baking experience?
No, I love food, and I know kitchens well. I'd worked in my own kitchen, but I'd never baked bread before, and especially, we also built a wood-fired oven. So that's like, it's a high dive, but with a pike and a twist, to actually get the oven right, because I can't just turn it up or down, and if I get halfway through my bake and I've run out of heat, so it's made it all that much more challenging, to get a good bake in.
I don't want to be negative, but did you have a few bad days? Yeah, and I still do, and that's what keeps me going, really, is it's every bake is an adventure. Oh.
I don't know what's going to happen. The guy that I got the oven designed from is Alan Scott, who's a wonderful fellow. But I remember when I was building the oven, I spoke to him, and he said, "You've got to remember," he said, "making sourdough bread is like, making wine. He said, this is today's vintage you're creating,
Yes.
and it'll be different next week and the week after. And it's very, very true.
So you've kept your sourdough starter going all this time, no doubt?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was reading that in California, when the gold rush was on, they actually bought some bakers from France, and they've still got their baker shop in San Francisco. But their sourdough starter was so important to that it's been going for years and years and years and years. And and you read about stories like this, you know, that it's a treasure. It's like the family jewels.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, they sell their starters over there, you know, for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
You know, if you have an old starter. You know, I must admit, I think there's a little bit of mythology around it. I'm not convinced about all of that. And there are bakeries, you know, in France who make a fresh starter from scratch every few months, you know. So there's different schools of thought around whether an old starter is necessarily any better than a newer starter. And the reality is it changes. As you change flour, the natural mix of bacteria in a sourdough starter will alter and change to meet the bacteria that are naturally in the flour and so on. So, yeah.
It's quite a complex job because at the same time you've got to pick your flour. You're fortunate enough, I see, to be close enough to that fantastic flour mill at Allera, which its flour is to die for. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Well, that's right. Kyalla Flour is probably the biggest organic flour mill in the country, I think. So I have access to all of those flours very readily. And then I also there's a biodynamic farmer just up the road in Cecil Plains who has a little mill, and I can get flour from him as well. So it's quite nice to be able to use different flours, and it's a critical ingredient. You know, at the moment, for example, the flours are quite low in protein because for a variety of reasons. And if you have very low protein flour, it makes it even more difficult to make bread. So there's a challenge in that even. And you know, as someone who hasn't been baking all their lives, my first reaction when I'm having difficulty is it's my fault. And sometimes it's just you haven't taken into account the changing characteristics in the flour. So yeah, it's interesting.
So when you first started out, was it just going to be that you were going to have a little wood-fired oven at home to play with yourself?
I always when I built the oven, I thought I'm going to do this commercially. I guess it all happened rather quickly after that, and I guess the speed at which it happened came as a surprise. And when you're trying to learn to bake commercially, you really have to produce commercial batches, which means you really have to sell it, or you end up wasting a lot of produce. So I just dove in, you know, and I made some very ordinary bread, I have to confess. But over the years, I feel like now I make pretty good bread. But it's, you know, I'm still learning. I still learn something every bake. Which is the nature of the process.
I think that's fantastic. The one thing that bread is one of those things. My husband absolutely loves bread, and I can wait for the right piece of bread. You know, I'm not that sort of addicted to it but I'll wait for a good loaf. And one thing I do notice is that when you have, and when I say a good loaf, I'm talking about good flour and a good process, and I love the sourdough concept of bread. I think it's fantastic. But it lasts, Laurie. You know, that's the thing, whereas you can buy some bread and you'll look, and the next day it's covered in mould.
That's exactly right. I mean, the sourdough bread, we often just glad wrap it and put it in the fridge, and it'll last for weeks. As long as it doesn't get any moisture on it,
yes,
it just doesn't mould. You know, it just lasts, and then you can take it out and you can either toast it or just warm it in the oven. And honestly, you'd think you baked it that day. It is incredibly robust
It's fantastic, isn't it?
bread.
Well, they say that the first sort of loaves, they talk about the 1,500 years before Christ. It was in Egypt that they were making it then. So when you think it's a very old style of bread,
Yes.
which is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it is. And I read stories in France, the bakers used to travel around to the farmhouses. So they didn't have a bakery shop. They'd take their leaven and they'd visit a farm and they'd bake them their bread for the month.
Oh.
And jealously guarding their leaven, of course, and then they'd move on to the next farm and bake their bread and so on. So it's quite a different kind of method of baking that was used as well.
I think it's fantastic. Now, you started making muesli.
Yes. Well, the reason for that is that with a wood-fired oven, it takes me 2 days of... I put a fire in on Saturday, and it's ready to go on Monday morning.
Wow.
But that also... And basically what you're doing is there's an incredible thermal mass that you're heating up. So where you build the fire to heat the oven is where you end up baking. But you by the time you're ready to bake, you scrape all the ash out and you give that a wash out. So that's your oven space. So the only heat you have to do your bake is stored in the fire brick and about a metre of concrete that sits above and around that cooking cavity.
Wow.
And then as you bake, that heat is absorbed into the cooking cavity and into the bread. So by the time I've got to the end of the day's bake, the oven temperature's dropped down, let's say, to around 200. And the next day, then it's perfect for baking muesli and doing other things. And then the day after, it's great for doing slow cooking and, for the next couple of days. So you can get 3 or 4 or 5 days sort of worth of cooking out of a wood-fired oven if you manage it well. And with the muesli, a lot of bakeries of this type often have a muesli product because it's free energy, basically.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so it is. It's lovely to then also play with all of those muesli ingredients.
I noticed on your website there you were proudly showing off, I think it would be called, this beautiful pig you'd cooked.
Oh, yes.
It looked fantastic. So you'd actually put a suckling pig inside the wood-fired oven. So you've got the baking, you've got the roasting ability too.
Oh, that's right, yeah. I mean, once you have a wood-fired oven and you're using it for bread, you've got a wonderful big oven that you can use for a variety of purposes. The other thing we've done is a big red emperor fish, and then I actually made the salt dough and wrapped it in the dough and baked it that way, and it was fabulous.
And some of these things, I mean, I must say that I am one of those people who loves to watch cooking shows, and I was amazed just recently that someone was going on about how they'd encased this particular chook or whatever in dough. And as a child, I can remember my mother used to always do our pickled pork like that. And she'd encase it in a dough and put it in the oven and then crack it open. And seriously, it was just like the most beautiful meat because probably it wasn't the most tenderest pork when I think back about it.
You're probably right.
And it turned it into this lovely succulent meal because it had been encased in the bread and held all the juices and the flavours in.
Yeah, that's right. And if you go back to at that time, often, when the bakeries were the heart of the community, you didn't have mass-produced bread. You had your local bakery. People would bring their hams, wrap them in dough and cook them in the baker's oven. That was quite a common, a shared oven facility was quite commonly used. I mean, sadly, those days are gone.
Sadly. Now, tell me this. So retirement for you has now actually taken you into a commercial bakery that you're working at, all week? Or do you have
No, I don't work at it quite that hard. I mean, it is, I'm only baking bread 1 day a week, and we probably do muesli another day, and then, packing and other things might take another day or two. So it's very much, we try and manage our bakery so that we're not completely tied to it. And if I want to take a holiday, I take a holiday. So, and the moment this becomes a chore, I will just stop the bakery. So the whole idea of this is that it's enjoyable, it's fun, it brings something to the community that it wouldn't otherwise have. And that makes it worthwhile. I've no intention of turning it into some kind of 9 to 5 work pattern.
I think it's incredible that you've gone from such a, as you said, an office bound to really it's such a hands-on job. It sounds fantastic.
It's wonderfully rewarding. I mean, I can't tell you how good it is to get to the end of the day and see a rack full of bread. You know, I mean, mind you, the days I get to the end and that I'm completely satisfied with every batch are quite rare. But when I get to the end of a day, it's physically quite tiring, so I'm exhausted, but it's this wonderful reward, and there is, you know, it's a real privilege. I think it's a real privilege to be making food that people then eat. I mean, I just can't quite get over that privilege that we have in the food industry to be cooking for people to consume, and that brings me a lot of pleasure as well.
I think that's one of the things that and I don't want to sound sexist in this, but one of the things that women have had for many years is that pleasure of putting food on the family table.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very nice thing. Thank you for joining me this morning. I say to people, you can't get this bread delivered. You have to go to Pittsworth and make sure it's a day that you're doing the baking.
That's right. Or give me a call. Call us on the line. Oh, also, you know, I do also run the bakery on a Monday. If people want to come and spend the day in the bakery with me, they're very welcome. So it just means give me a call and we'll set up a time. And you know, it's lovely to, if you like, educate people a little bit about the process.
Yeah, it's
and
great.
Share some of my leaven with them. I give it away. I don't sell it for hundreds of thousands. So.
I noticed you can buy it in California for $600.
That's right. So it's a bargain. You get it for nothing.
Thank you, Laurie, for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Anna.
Our pleasure.
Okay.
And we've been talking with Laurie Stiller from Kalala, and it's a micro bakery. And isn't that fantastic? And this is a hobby that has become sort of a nice community thing at the same time. Those lucky people in Pittsworth getting to eat this scrum bread. I think we've got our sponsors back shortly. And you're back with our community kitchen. The shaker lemon tart, I thought I would just go over those ingredients again because apparently sometimes I give them a little bit quickly. So the 2 lemons, which of course you've placed in the freezer for about 3 hours. Basically what you're doing is you just want to get these really, really thin slicely, and if you can do that just by skills, I wouldn't worry too much, because what you're going to do is put them in a bowl, add a little bit of sugar and toss them around, because that way then they're going to sort of start to break down a little bit, I think. Which is fantastic. And of course you've got the 3 eggs, 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and your short crust pastry, which was 100 grams of unsalted butter, a third of a cup of icing sugar, and 1 1/4 cups of plain flour, and 1 egg yolk. Whilst you can always buy your commercial short crust pastry, sometimes if you've got the time, give it a little bit of a go, because at the end of the day it is just so nice to have that whole thing baked. Listening to Laurie before, here's a guy who retired and then opens up a micro bakery because his passion for cooking the bread has become so much that he just loves it. So I think that's a great thing. So once you've actually done your pastry there, you're going to put in the fridge for a little while, and then you can roll it out. I always roll out pastry between 2 pieces of baking paper. It just is so much easier. It doesn't make a mess. Got any left over, you can roll it up and put it back in the fridge and use it for something else at a later date, or freeze it. It doesn't really matter. So you're going to actually bake that for blind bake it for 20 minutes at 180 degrees. Cool slightly. Reduce your oven temperature then down to 160. Whisk together the eggs and the butter, then combine with the sliced lemon mixture and pour into your tart shell and bake for 25 minutes. When you're doing your lemons, it may sound a lot that you're using 2 cups of caster sugar, but remembering that that is actually going to go really thick and sort of, I guess, nice and sugar and syrupy. And the whole idea is once you add your eggs and your butter to that Maya lemon mix, it's just going to create a great base. Give that a go. I think it looks fantastic. I had such a nice time talking to those people this morning. I think it's fantastic when you see people, even when you're talking to Carolyn, who is looking after her sheep every day. She's become quite knowledgeable in her cheese making. These are people who have learnt these things. She's from 4th generation Merino sheep farm, and of course changed that around because trends change, people's demands, and hers is such a lovely little boutique. Not only do you get the cheese, but you get the whole environment there if you go to have a look. So if you do want to, all you've got to do is go onto their website, which is www.towri, which is TOWRI, sheepcheeses.com.au, and they're around the Beaudesert area. Nice trip for a weekend drive. And of course, we've been talking to Laurie from up at Pittsworth with his Kalala Micro Bakery, and you can go online and have a look at that too, or you can give him a buzz. His bakery shop's number is 46937255. He's happy if you want to go up there and help him bake. I'm sure there's going to be maybe some chopping wood to go into that on top of it. But thanks for joining me this morning, and don't forget, guys, we've got this beautiful studio in here. We can take up to about half a dozen guests, I would say, if we and that would be fantastic. It gives you an opportunity. A lot of the times all you ever hear is the voice on the radio. But if you do have something that you grow, you produce, something you're proud of, you might have a lovely family tradition of food that you want to share with our listeners, come on in, give us a buzz, 54951015. They'll put you in touch with me and we can arrange a time that you can come in and be involved in our community kitchen at the radio station. Thanks for listening. Be with you next week.